So as you prop prep, you have your bolster on top of a rolled up blanket and a flat blanket on top, and it's right behind you. So you want to feel where your sacrum is just lightly pressing towards the bolster. It's not trying to smush onto it because there's going to be this arch in the back right above. And so I would take a couple blocks just under the legs, even if your thighs have the capacity to kind of flop down. Use the blocks, it will help protect your hips. And also the hip flexors might get kind of overly wrangled around if you start practicing with the knees forcefully open here. That's something that I'm recently learning a little bit of with aging hips. So we're trying to work on creating stability and strength in those zones in the hip joints. So you'll have your feet together and your belt in a big loop. And as you reach that over the tops of your feet, it does pull around, so it's around the ankle. Okay, so it's the top, right? It basically is the farthest you can place that belt is where it's going to press, and it presses when you lean back. So be sure you've got plenty of belt, lots of length, and then that belt is at the very eyebrows of the buttocks. Have a sandbag nearby. Those that don't want sand on the ribs, put it on your feet now. And those that want to use the sandbag, if you have a deluxe setup and 2 sandbags, you can have one on each inner thigh. And or you can place the sandbag across the upper abdomen. Now, as the sand is supporting either of those areas below or in the center, it is a centering collection, right? There's this weight that centers the mid-body, the heart, the abdominal motion. So when you get a feel of that movement track of the breathing muscles, I want you to feel if the shoulders can generally release down. And the reach of the rib cage is only with the movement of the breath. So align the feeling of your inhalation and the sense of the exhalation, emptying out the lungs. Arriving in your practice, slowing down, and maybe entertaining some of the thoughts or plans that, come across, and then feel the breath as it centers. And if you feel that it's a centering experience in the core vine, that's kind of a nice way to think of it, as the core vine, because you have that spine, the vine of the spine, and then you have this kind of core. And it's not more than a vine, right? It has expansiveness at the rib cage. It kind of blossoms in that space. And both sides of the breath, right? The inhale and the exhale, there's always further to work with, right? You can generally get a little bit more of an inhale. It's probably the side that's the most challenging to get motivated. And then the exhale is pleasant, right? You're emptying out and letting go. So perhaps let that be slightly vocal for you. The out breath through the mouth and the in breath through the nose. Be sure the arms are resting and that you feel that environment that's inside the layer of the rib cage is pulsing, right? There's an expansion and there's a centering and settling. Now moving the arms by moving the shoulders back and down. So if you lift up the arms or the elbows and the hands up from the ground and you feel knowingly that from your shoulder tip down to the elbow, it's not really on the ground, right? It's guided and kind of framing your side. But you consider it grounded because of the elbow. But I want you to keep that guidance of the shoulders being with their movement back and towards the bolster. So if you lift your arms and they stretch open, you can kind of consider like these are wings, like your wings are moving out. And you could visualize that, skeletally. Maybe you visualize a bird or something and real expansiveness and that movement outwards, right? It's not going to just flow back. It's going to have to stretch out with the ribs. And that might feel muscular for you, quite a bit of blood flow into the armpit chest area. So reach the arms back a little bit. Now, some of us are going to feel comfortable stretching way back and the hands together. And if I don't bring my hands together, I have to use my muscles the whole time to keep the arms up. So if you do take the hands together, it's almost like a relief, like, okay, they're latched. And just by latching, they're creating a support, right, for the shoulder blades, although they're independent. And interlacing the fingers. Now, if that's difficult overhead, you can do that straight up over your face or over your heart. And then turn the palms towards the ceiling or behind you. And feel the breath for a couple moments. Doesn't mean a couple breaths. Maybe it's one slow in and out breath. Maybe it's 2 or 3. But you're guiding your arms back. And they're reaching, right? The shoulders are encouraged. The ribs are lengthening or expanding, perhaps. So this is really our movement meditation. And then we bring the arms apart from the hands and the elbows down by the sides. Remove any sand. And then we'll go right into the circulation, consideration of the circulation in your hips. So unbuckle, slide the belt so that you can get to it when you need it. It's still under you or it's maybe right beside you. But you can feel how the legs have this positional kind of readiness for the hips. But we're going to just go one-sided with it. So we'll lift up the left knee and feel the bottom of the foot down. And then as you keep that core, the backing of your core, like your back space that touches the bolster, I want you to try to keep that kind of into the bolster. It feels like a bit of a tail tucking position. And then you're going to try to lift up that right foot and cross that foot, just the ankle piece to the left knee. So you're not crossing the whole leg. But as you get your ball to the left upper outer leg, go right into it. You're going to sink the body weight into the ball. If the block is in the way, I wouldn't use it today for this one at all. So that you can kind of find that satisfaction of kind of rocking back and forth till you feel, oh, this is where the ball could be set. That's individual. It doesn't mean that what I'm doing is where you need that. You might have the ball a little bit closer into your hip, like you're smushing it. You're just not sitting on it. Although I have to admit, I haven't tried to sit on the ball for this instruction. Tempting. Okay, tip the body weight, the left knee over, hold the right knee, and feel where the spine, especially the neck space here, is supported. So I'm trying to get my head centered so my chin is centered down as well, so my chin isn't poking up. If you can't get the chin centered down, the neck long, then you might, for this pose, take your blanket, unless you're opposed to it. That's maybe too bulky under my head. So you might take it so that if you have your blanket, you might curl it just a little bit. That's better. The other way was just too much. So I don't want you to have your head tilted as if you could, almost be looking behind you. So as you hold onto that knee, not to say anybody is, you're holding to that knee and you're guiding the leg towards the left. Let that right side of the spine feel supported. And noticing what's enjoyable about the circulation experience in the shape. Maybe it's enjoyable to peel away some of the tension. Maybe that could be perceived as a pursuit worth doing and establishing time to do that, like this practice. Yeah, the right arm is just relaxed. It's not reaching behind you. This way you can emphasize the right upper leg into the hip and around the buttock. Okay. Now it's essential that the left leg is muscular in this position. So you probably feel like there's a little bit of reservation. It's not all the way flopped. So I find this ball is really important that I have it far enough up and into that left leg that I can almost kind of rest this left thigh over. Because there's some tone just to keep the shape. Okay, now let go of the leg. And before you switch to the other side, take a few moments, alternating, moving a knee in towards the ribs without a block under your hips. So it's a little different than we've done. So lifting up a foot and trying to move that knee in towards your center. If it's really tense in the hips to get the leg to lift at all, use the opposite foot on the floor, pushing that down to strengthen the low back and that hip. Okay, now left foot up, cross to the right knee, put the ball to that right, upper outer, I want to say thigh, but maybe it's a little bit more into your hip. So you kind of put it up to the side and then you kind of curl it in. All right, and then just go on your merry leaning way. So the left leg shifts over towards the right. It's all shifting to the right side. And you know, and the weight ratio in your spine, right, is likely pretty balanced. I know the right side might feel a tiny bit more. Reach for the left knee with the right hand. Now that when you hold on to the knee, it could take away some of the tension in the back. And the more you analyze it, you might not be able to relax into it. So noticing the focus on breath. And feeling expansiveness through the rib cage. And centering and settling. Okay, now when you're feeling how the neck responds, I do have a little bit more of a height under my neck space with this tiny bit of a rolled blanket. And it's not for everybody to offer that unless you find it comfortable for you. It might feel like it's really intense to do that type of a load in the neck. So it's up to your experience right now, but I'm trying to get the left leg to go across. So get the feeling of motioning that left leg towards the right. Okay, just a few more moments. Breathing. Okay. Now this left thigh is going to be pulling ourselves into side stage in a moment. So we're all very experienced with these sequences, so we'll just kind of go right in through them. And I like to keep the kind of the science perspective of the class, right? We're leading, these postures have a layer of connection, one into the next. Okay, so as you let go of that knee, yeah, the leg is kind of warmed up for it. So it's going to be the leg that we're putting the weight bearing into. So as you uncross and you step down, doesn't feel like you're stepping down too much, but Your windshield wiper the legs, and how about kind of explore that windshield wiper version of movement? The hips are shifting. It really seems easier than when I was marching my knees up. But as I shift the legs side to side, you're going to get a feeling of the waist actually in the rear kind of sliding down off of the bolster a little bit. At some point, you're not going to want to be halfway on the bolster. So we'll shift our weight to our left side and be protective of your neck. So you're going to let your head turn and get a feeling here with this direction, and that you take the bolster. Well, actually, we'll follow the directions here. Okay, we'll take the bolster so it's across for side sage. And if you like a little bit of a twist, right, you like turn through the waist, let's kind of save that. But if you do want a little bit of that when you set up your twisting, anyhow, is not true. But as you put that bolster setting there, get a ball, get a sandbag, all your props, place it to the hip, okay? Or maybe it's kind of thigh-ward. And then if you have a block overhead, perhaps it's required for you, maybe not. Blanket might need to go higher. But rest where your brain is, centered here. And the sand then can be moved, right? Once you get into your side, then you have kind of the opportunity to slide around that sand's perspective. Maybe you want to venture into the full length. Now, the legs really have some similar variety of movements as we started, right? They're either moving outwards or moving inwards, but come into this side position and reach with that right limb, whether it's open towards the ceiling, like stretching outwards, counter spin, or it's reaching over. If you're capable of either of those directions, you're doing some helpful rhythm, right, for your shoulders in general. Gliding and sliding the movements. And the left side is just completely still. It's like holding the fork together here on the bottom. Okay, now deciding if that arm's going to go overhead. If there is an inkling of discomfort, then what I'm going to recommend that you do is bring the arm down by this on the side. Okay, even if you feel, oh, but I need to do more, but if it hurts, then you will find that if your arm is on the side, you can work with the shoulder shrugging and rolling back and down the right side, right? Versus promoting a little mild, subtle injury type of pattern, stressing out the joint. So we want to do a little bit of stress, right? But not for pain. So feel the weight into your left side. And then regardless of your arms reaching, you're working with the rib cage and the sandbag. So sure, if my arm is overhead, I feel like the whole rib cage is like a spine, right? I'm stretching between the ribs, the intercostals, and each of those intercostals are connected to the vertebrae in the back. So it's phenomenal, right? If you just study all those sets, right? You got 12 sets. Lots of vertebrae behind that as well. So work with the breath and the established focus on movement, internalizing. Okay, and eyes closed if possible. No rush in and out of the pose, but feel where the weight is onto that left hip. Okay, now if the breath gets a little quiet right when you're on your side, it can change its energy output. There's just this full rib, intercostal range, the secondary breathing muscles are activated. So you're putting some of that, some of that sponging up that intensity that would be just stuck in your face and your throat. It's into the ribs a little more. So let's keep that going. So we're going to come into a horizontal chest opener. And that way we go from this right side of the rib cage, and then we're just going to dial all the way through the center piece. Try moving the sand away, let it just slough off. And then try moving your knee, maybe your right knee to the left knee to start. But you're going to actually roll onto your back on the bolster, and you'll have to probably lift up a tad and then move the ball if it's in your way. What you might like to do, though, is have the ball between the knees and then a little bit of turning into the feet. So now I'm going to use this height of my blanket to my advantage. Not exactly how it looks, but it feels good. It's wadded up so that my head is lowered back and down. I think actually for my circulation, it's going to be better to have my blanket lower. Okay. Now, what's going to be the change for some of you with that is your back muscles, right? So we used to do a little bit more back arching, right? Then I started adding the block under the pelvis to make it easier. And now we're trying the full back arching again. So your ribs are warming up. You've started warming them up for a while. And so use that awareness of the ball. And if your hips are a tad up off the ground, like if you're pushing into the ball, and that tends to get your rear a little bit lifted, not all the way off the floor, but you can feel it's up enough that it makes it easier for your back. That's okay. So if you're feeling you want to kind of lean into it and press the body weight down in your pelvis, that's okay too. Okay, so explore the movement of squeezing into the ball. That's probably your only exploration that's interesting. And we're without sand. I mean, some of you might want to get some sand on your ribs, but feel how it's a surface intensity right now with this expansiveness. But the back almost kind of pushes in when you're opening the front. It's like they can't both fan open at the same time, right? One side has to strengthen and one side has to flexibilize. Okay, has to open. So give a few moments. Now, if you are pretty exuberant about this and are just amazed at your ribs and you want more of that, instead of pulling on a belt, just let the elbows open, frame the bolster with the arms. If you just have had enough of it with the back muscles, you can also put a block under your pelvis. Okay. Now squeeze into the ball, and that might get your hips a little bit off the ground, not completely up off the floor, but they might lift a little. Squeeze into the ball. And then feel that tilt of the spine, the arch. And you're going to try to get into side stage on the other side as kind of just loosely, right? Think about like a scarf in the wind or something kind of flying away. You want to be really kind of loose about the movement, even though you're stuck in this body. So you're going to be rolling, and the ball's going to probably fall out. But you're trying to roll to that right side, and then get a feeling of the rib cage now moving into that other side. And as you come up, make your way to that second side and just play with it. Play with the reaching. How are you going to set up maybe a block overhead? Maybe you do use the ball on the inside of that left leg. But when you're orienting to this other side, you are going to feel where the waist lengthens. Even though we may think about our waist the other direction most of the day, unless you lie on your side a lot, maybe add this to your daily habit. But when you reach over, some of us reaching over is not the hand over the head. Some of us, this is too much on the shoulder. So we might be here with the reach. You might have your hand on your shoulder and then feel the breath. Use the sandbag on this if possible. Maybe you like the sand on the hip, maybe higher up on the ribs. Expand and relax. Okay, is there any part of this pose you could relax into? Even if it's simply the right hip. Okay, so the weight into the hip matters, how much you put weight into the hip. You can tell that fine-tuning restoratives it's a bit of a sophisticated practice. So that it starts to be something that you like to polish and, you know, just improve on as yourself improves, right? Your inner environment. So when that arm is in that reach, with the weight of your headrest, admittedly, I'm a little more on the back of my head on this side, because I'm kind of looking towards the screen, but you might want to be on the very side of your head, okay? So that the neck doesn't have a deep curve, but you're going to have your three primary curves in this practice most of the time, right? Sometimes we're creating length between them, but they're honored. You honor the curves all the time. So with a few more moments, maybe you start to move that left arm open. Breathe. Now everything's going to be cumulative in the practice today. So we're going to keep building on this. Now that this left side is a little opening, we're going to keep with it. So when the body has this shape of centering in the pose it's given, start to bring that left arm to a center place, right? So maybe the bolster, maybe you move the sandbag off with the left hand. And then when you start to come to the rolling to the right side, we're going to work this path, right? We're trying to move into the next shape comfortably. So you're going to bring your knees up towards the bolster. So you make like a cannonball shape and you come to sitting and then get up on your bolster. Pretty easy, seamless. Right leg out, left knee bending, left foot towards the right leg. Maybe it doesn't feel good on touching, but when you have that leg out, let's not worry about those props behind us, we'll leave them. But we have a sandbag on the left thigh, and I need something under my left knee. Maybe you find that your knee just touches the ground, but with the bolster under you, it's going to get your pelvis a little bit more even with the legs anyhow, so they're going to probably bounce up, which makes it an easier pose, right, when we sit on top of something. But, you know, help your body age. Okay, so feel where you have the leg pattern, so they're reaching to like this kind of V, even though that's just the knees that are reaching out. I take a block next to my right leg, so just besides it, flex through the right foot, and then you can have the block up to the third setting, the second. I would probably be third or second. I'm going to go for the third because it'll be easier. And then if I want to go lower, I'll find out. But we just were here on our side, and it didn't look just like this, but we were in a side reach. So I want you to slide that block towards the foot and lean into it with your right arm. Now, if you push the block too close to your foot, you're going to have some challenge getting there. So maybe it's besides the knee. And then bring your right elbow down, that right shoulder back, and focus on the side waist arch, right? So it's not so much I'm trying to get it firm and tall. I'm trying to rotate, counter spin. Now, I like to use my right hand, as long as I know my elbow's on the block, to put my head into that hand. And that might be too much of a stretch to go that far down. So what if it is, you would use 2 blocks. You just stack them on up. You could even use them so they're flat, so it's more space for an elbow. Maybe you have a big elbow. So that's pretty good. Although I think that's about the same height as when I had it on that 3rd height. So you could put 2 on their 2nd setting and bring your arm down onto that. Yeah. So keep it simple. You don't need to put your block next to your foot, but if everyone's a different arm length, so some of you might be lower than the knee, but feel how this waist is, and maybe put your left hand so it's around your kind of cuddle up with your waist here. So you're getting the waist to turn to the left, trying to get things to go left side, rotate. Left arm could be relaxed behind you and it could be over. But you know, overdoing it isn't necessarily skillful. So you might find, oh, it's going to lean into this right side and feel, breathe. That might be satisfying. The sandbag is pretty helpful on this one, so you don't fall over. Just let that right leg be relaxed. It doesn't have to flex or push. It's enough stretch already. Good, and then feel how that waist has a turn a bit to that left side. A little bit of a counter spin through the fibers of the waist. Breathing. A few more moments. Okay, so you'll feel how the side 1, we'll call this side 1 left side, has a little bit of length. And now for the meditative piece of it, when you bring that left arm down and maybe touch to the sandbag, start to lift up and then turn your waist forwards, okay? And, you know, sense the difference in the side energy, right? Even if you're the same height on each side, there's probably an energetic difference from that pulse of movement. So we're going to move that ball away from the left leg and then lower down the knee. So I kind of slide my left foot closer to the bolster now. And then see if you can either put your right foot on a block in front of you, knee pointed out, or you could cross the right leg over the left. Now, of course, this is the deluxe version, but I don't want you to force, if it hurts your knee for any, or it's just too much pretzel positioning, you can put your foot on the block, okay? You still are gonna need this knee, so don't unscrew that yet. Okay, so we've got the knee pointed up, or it's positioned out, it's still a bulb that you can touch onto. And then when you're centering, I imagine your side waist kind of gets back into the program here once you cross the leg or you put it forward. So notice how much you can turn without your arms. So as you breathe out, you're rotating, right? So you inhale to extend and lift, and you exhale to rotate. Okay, so that's it. That's what you got for your range of motion. And part of that's your agreement with breath and spine circulation. I mean, it's, for many of us, it's kind of bleak, right? How much rotation we really have with that, pushing our arms, overdoing that. So feel how you turn, and then get your right hand back to the blanket or a block if you prefer, and bring your left arm to your right leg, and then feels so good to have that support of the arm. But you still want to focus on lift to extend, right? Inhale to lift. That's what I'm trying to say. Inhale to lift, and exhale to twist. It was in there somewhere. Okay, now when you're turning, instead of an analyzing pattern, just work with feel, right? How does it feel to turn, to use your arm, to not push with your arm, hold the knee, all these versions. But I want you to emphasize that you're massaging in the waist and in the spine. Right? So you're massaging those surface muscles. And heck, it's okay if you don't just hold the pose. Maybe you're doing some movement forward and around the ribs right now. Okay. Now, when we come back towards forward reality, I want you to kind of look back to that right side to your blankets, and you're going to have one of them taken off if you have to. Pull one of them close and then turn to the forward reality. Take off the sand and let's come back with the right leg reaching behind you. And I want to make sure that you have some understanding of this pigeon pose with the tilt. So I've got the seat on the bolster, which creates the arch in the back. So can you put your hands down or your elbows on blocks if it hurts your wrists, and take a moment where you feel the kind of exercise of the spine of the hip here, because you are kind of holding up the spine of the hip here. And then let the body lower down. Now that could be in increments, right? You might be a little bit tense to get down to the elbows, but if it works, kind of marinate that left hip for a few moments. You feel the weight into the hip. Feel the circulation through the spine. I don't feel the spine as much as my left hip. I'm still stuck on the hip. But I know that my spine is helpful to have, regardless of its reaction. Now, hands walk in. I want you to come back to as clean as a dog pose as you can, okay? Pure dog. Okay, left leg comes back, and then alternate bending the knees. I guess that's not a pure dog pose, is it, if you're bending your knees? But you might find that a human body has to bend the knees to get to a dog pose. So human dog. So when we're here, we've got the roots of the toes. One thing I'm still learning here is sometimes when I play with patterns of working with the ball of the foot and the heel, you know, when you're accessing your heel, you're likely going to get more hamstring. The ball of the foot might be more calves. But we're going to do some good investigation with that on the wall pretty soon. So I want you to just feel kind of the basic plain state of your feet, wider than hips distance. And the head is between the arms or maybe a little bit forward for you, right? You're probably doing the best you can to muscle up into the shoulders to hold the shape. Now, feel that lower abdomen, trying to feel it kind of lift up in towards the low back. So it's a little bit of an abdominal control. Okay, now as you bend through the knees, pretty easy going, lower down, and then push the bolster, turn it so it's lengthwise underneath you, and then as comfortably as you can, you're going to lean your hips into it. Now, some of us might like the bolster to be farther back under our hips. Some may want less of the bolster under us. So when you're lowering down the front space onto the bolster, you know, feel if one hip is dominant over the other, just the hip flexor into the bolster, and then make it even. Get even with your hips here. Lower down so that you've got no say in it at this point. You're going to bring your elbows forward, so it's kind of a forward sphinx pose. And let the abdomen move into the bolster. Take up residence in that bolster, expanding and relaxing. Okay, now this seems pretty simple, although the back is working quite a bit to maintain. Okay, so I want you to slide your hands back so that the hands are under the shoulders. on the floor, right? They're not right under the shoulders, but on the ground. Fingers open, span the hands. And then when the feet are apart, you want to feel that the tops of the feet have even touchdown or even pressure. And then when you lift up the back of your head, notice right when this complex of back muscles and glutes fire. So I find that when I lift up, I can really, if I was to highlight the places I feel it, it's very spinal up into the brainstem. Okay. Now, if you don't feel your rear activate here, what I want you to do is hook the toes under, kind of cling the toes under to the floor so you can feel the feet push into the ground, the roots of the toes, stretching them. And then you're going to lift up, and then you're going to try, hands open, to push. Your elbows might buckle a bit, but you're going to try to straighten out the arms. Yep. And then as you lift up, maybe the tops of the feet can come back down. Maybe you didn't need the toes under to get up. Okay. So feel the natural arch to the spine. Use the bolster. It's usually helpful for the back for this. Okay. And now as you lower down, notice that this is almost necessary to get back and up. So if I was to try to push back from this position, it would be almost cruel to my shoulders and my spine. So you've got to use all your curves to get yourself up and down. So hands slide back, chin to chest, come up to cat pose. So knees might tuck in, round your back, and arch through the spine. Inhale and exhale, round the back. Inhale, arch the spine. And exhale, round the back. Inhale, arch. Okay, and now as you find that arch and that pattern of movement, we're going to step forward with that left foot. I know it's a little funny because you got the bolster stuck here, but what you're going to do is lean the body weight down and maybe move the bolster a little to the right side so it's under your thigh. And work with the hands on blocks or on the floor and stretch through that right thigh. Simple, quadricep. Let that hip flexor open so the very front piece of the thigh, the front flap that connects into your pelvis, as far as structure goes, is basically arching, right? You're not trying to flatten anything. You're trying to work with a natural curve. Okay, so feel that position in the hip. And now come back to the left knee behind you and then step the right foot to that right side. Feel the weight and also feel the circulation in your neck relaxing. Okay, one side, reasonably might feel a little bit more spacious than the other, or just some different balancings internally through the thigh muscle. The inner thigh could feel different one side than the other. So make some notes on your notepad. Back leg reaching. Although the bolster just holds it up, so it's pretty happy haven. That's a good name, Happy Haven, for whatever, I don't know. So when you feel that length through the left thigh, the hands, if I move them out, I feel a little bit more broadness through the front of the core body. So that right knee points a little bit out. Okay, now come into pigeon on this side. So turn the bolster to the horizontal, walk the right foot over to the left. Okay, so right foot creeps over to the left side of your mat, and then the right knee is over, and the hip is holding on the bolster. So you've kind of hooked your knee, and then when you reach down, you might bring your elbows down immediately, or you might focus on just trying to create this balance. Now for this side, you might have your knee a little higher, Now, keeping the awareness that you don't have to have your knee all the way pushing and rounding. So you can always put something under this knee. If you've ever tried that for pigeon, it is kind of interesting. It's definitely more tense, but keeping the awareness that find what comes into support for you. I like to have my arms down. I know some of you practice when you stretch your arms to the opposite side of the knee, right? So if my right knee is pointed out, I go with my arms over to the left. Yeah, so, but again, overdoing it might be not necessary, right? Just keep it simple. Let the body feel these ranges of motion. And the weight of your arms pushes into the floor, right? Feel that resistance, just simple and pure. I'm pushing into the floor with my elbows. And then I'm letting my spine kind of lean forward. And then it just becomes a balance. The beginning of all arm balances, right? Is simply feeling your structure lined up. Breathing slow. Exhaling completely. Now come up and walk the hands to the knee. Stretch the left leg out to the left side open, right knee open. So you're in a simple seated, expansive back hip pose, right? So the left leg is out. And then, last time we had that sand over to the leg and the ball under the knee, or some of you may have used a block. But as we come into the side reach, we'll just put our block or our block stack beside the left knee and then reach down with the elbow and lean, okay? So I like to have a couple blocks. That seemed to be my necessity for length. Now, you don't have to have that block stack so it's this way. It could be flat, it could be a different version for you. And even if it seems like you can get onto the block easily and turn, you don't have to make it harder. So likely there's some improvement with these subtle things in the rib space, because think about you're trying to lift up in general. The idea of getting your insides to lift up is the idea, not to round over and over. So anything we can get some inspiration of movement, the opposite of prolapse. So when you're tipping to that left side, feel that touch, feel the turn to that right side. And then you could put your head into your hand. If you don't like this version, you can also have your block just besides the leg and stretching your arm down to it. Some might prefer that. And then the right arm reaches over the side. But the turn of the ribs is important here. The reach of the armpits, the breath. Okay, now of course there's always further to rotate, right? The body is bound by muscular, right? And also that it's protecting the organs all the time. So you might find that when you are reaching with that right arm and or the head, right? Some of us might say that this is a limb, right? Limbic brain. So the head's leaning, so it's a limb. Now when you come up, this side has felt some range of motion. So let's take that left leg and let's get a feel. Can we cross the foot over the right leg? Just kind of see if that's even part of the experience for you today. Or maybe this side, you change it up and you put a block under your foot, your knee points out on the block, right? The foot is on the block though. So you choose either block or no block. And then when you have that crossing, can you lift up through the rib cage? You can take a belt if you like to work with this turn as well, not overhead, but behind you. So your belt would be held, pretty small width, right? It's not very big. It's not that generous, but it gives you this direction of arms down the back. Yeah, not trying to pump them up, but down the back. So you can feel that grip of the muscles in the back, the arms, right? This back band of muscles in your arm, it doesn't feel like muscle, right? Sometimes it just feels like it's flappy. But this is a good one to kind of get some heat in that space. Kind of charges it a little bit. Not really tricep, but even more mysterious flesh than tricep. Okay. So now when you turn, you can keep holding the belt or hook the elbow to that left leg and then keep going. And maybe you need a block. Maybe you're going to reach around for your sandbag handle. You could do that as well. But kind of get a feel of that rotation through the waist. Yeah, and this is the final seated pose. From here on, we're going to the wall and we're going to work with different layers of the skeletal balance. So I want you to just notice what it feels like when you sit as far as your orientation to getting length up to the brain. Okay, so feel a few more of these moments where there's clearly some inspiration from your arm to bring you around to the left. You can feel if you're pulling your head to the left or if it's centered on top of the spine, on top of the world. Okay. Now feel if you can come back forward. I imagine you'd be thrilled to do that. Roll the shoulders, take a few moments, a few rolls back, and then complete that cycle of down. And then let's take that sandbag off and we're gonna bring ourselves to a wall space. So what you're gonna need is, have your ball, have your sand. You're gonna need your bolster, but I'm gonna recommend you do when you come off of this bolster here and you find your way to your wall spot is that you have your bolster to the right side and you'll have one blanket under your head and you'll have a belt. I think you'll want also one block. So whatever block you have remaining, grasp onto that. Okay, so come down to your back. You're gonna have your mat next to the wall, so as close to the wall. You don't have to have it right up to the wall if you don't want to. It won't be required, but you kind of do want to be able to feel your base ankle, I guess, your heel. Okay, so we're finding our wall space. Yeah, take your time. Instructions are simple. So you won't be missing a beat once you get there. Now, you're going to feel your standing pose when you're at the wall. So you need your whole mat. You're going to need your whole body to have a space. It's not really just wall space, but it's from the wall into the middle of the room. You want to be able to stand on your back, right? So place your heels to the wall. If you've got a little baseboard, you're going to want to be at the base. That's going to be clear, the base of it. So not like hooked up on top of that. Keep it the base. And then you might even bring your hands behind your head and kind of lift up and look at your feet. And you want to sense that your feet are pushing, right? So they're actually pushing into the wall. Now, the more you push, the likelihood of your tailbone pushing back and taking you away from the wall might happen in time. So you might have to continuously kind of reroute yourself. But once your flesh is pressing to the feet, take a moment here where you've got your sand. This is essential sand at the top of the thighs. So right on the top, cross the thighs. And you're going to need your belt. Okay. So have that nearby. And let's just buckle up our belt so we've got a loop. Stay kind of letting your thighs stay in this pattern of lengthening the front of the leg, stretching down to the feet. And even if it doesn't feel like it's necessarily a big stretch, it's nice to feel where your balance is around your hips, around the muscles. And you can even draw, if you were to draw a sketch of yourself right now, of your skeleton from the hips down, it might be kind of interesting what you consider your sacrum and the back of the pelvis, because there's some spaces that don't touch down generally. Okay, so we're going to get into that hamstring basin and the calves. Some of you want to do more calf work than hamstring work, I imagine. So your head on a blanket, I think, is helpful. I really like the head on the blanket. It's not always taut, even in these. So if you decide you don't want a blanket, you don't have to use that. But feel the feet as close together as they can go, pushing into the wall. Okay. And then you're going to move your sandbag to the front of the left thigh. So I'm going to turn the sandbag so that it's going straight down the left thigh. And I want to keep that sandbag so it's pretty high up, because what if it falls off, right? I don't want too much down to the knee. I'd rather have it higher up. So if it's more on your hip and towards your belly, that's fine. Okay, now keep the left foot pushing. It's got to stay grounded in the wall, and then slide the right foot in so the right knee points up. Okay. Now, if you start to slide a little bit off the wall, then bend your knees a little more, both of them, and then scoot yourself down so you really feel your left foot into the wall. Okay. The back of the knee is going to extend. That's going to happen here. You're going to have full length in the knee. So push through the ball of the foot if your knee is worried. Okay, now bring your right knee in. If your stand starts to get a little wonky, just trust it might work out. You might have to slide it back on, but chances are it won't completely, you won't lose everything. And I'm going to move my sandbag a little bit down because I want to feel my thighs stretch too. Okay. Now hold on to the belt. You don't have to do brain float. That's not required. I want you to decide on your own. So if I have my right foot, the belt to the ball of the foot, it's going to be a little more calf stretch. Okay. You know, when you stretch your calves, like at the park on the curb, you know, this is the point that you have to push into to drop the heel, then the calf will stretch. It's no different. But if I slide my belt towards my right on the heel, it's going to go higher in the leg. You're going to feel top, back of the leg. Yeah. So depending on what you need, right? What is more interesting to you? If you already have pretty open hamstrings and your leg just flops back, then I want to focus on the hamstring. But just getting the leg up might be plenty. So we got a loop. You have two options. You can bring your hands inside the loop overhead, and you can make this a smaller loop if it feels too much on your shoulder, and put the palms together, and just the palms together, not the belt around the webbing of in the index to the thumb. I want you to have just palms together. So it's a little easier on your shoulder. Now, you can also go to brain float, but you want more loop, right? You want a wider loop for that. So if you do take it to that level of using a wider loop, right, you're going to bring your belt to the back of your head. And I sometimes find that other position with my hands I like, because I can kind of organize the sensation in my calves. And this is a little more standard, like it just kind of gets an overall flush, not anything extra personalized. So this might be what you want because you can push into the wall nicely. I like this one. I can really feel that centering of my foot. I'll imagine that I can hear what everybody's feeling about it. Okay. Now, if you do brain float, you might notice that your foot belt choice of orientation was never really thought about very often. So I have my arms really close to me because it seems protective and good. I could bring them out, no problem. But it depends on what you're going to do with that belt. Are you going to try to move it down the foot or up the foot? Okay. I aim to feel the center of the back of my right leg, kind of the nucleus of the hamstring. So if I was to palpate that area, it feels like the muscles are all quite toned. That network is turned and activated on, isn't it? Okay. Now we're going to get ready to change sides. So I want you to slide the belt off your head if it's on the back of your head. And then we'll all meet with our hands, both hands holding the belt. So you got two sides. Now flex. So you get a nice feeling of pulling. Yeah, this is where I need the blanket under my head, otherwise my head would tilt back. I don't have that flexibility in my neck to go the other way. You might even need more blanket or a little towel under your neck. Okay, think of this session as always kind of rehabilitation work to get your props you need. Now we're going to remove the belt from the situation and bend the right knee and hold the back of the leg, not below the knee, so hold the back of the leg. Okay, push into your left foot, pull the back of that right leg, get a little higher on the back of the leg so you're closer to the very top of the back of that right thigh. Okay, now the foot might get a little tingly. Those things might come up. So now it's the perfect time to put that foot into the wall. So you're gonna reach down with the right foot, take the sandbag on over. You don't spend too much time in between with the legs up because you might be in for a surprise with their circulation differences. Yep. All right, so change the side. Get the left foot up into the belt, make a loop so it's still there. It's a position. And as you reach, the right foot pushes. I think we've got the idea of the foot into the wall. Okay, so attention is to the calf and also through the whole leg, all of that left leg, isn't it true? It's the whole leg experience. Now, if one side you feel different at the back of the pelvis, this would be a good time if you do have that mobility to move the leg back towards your chest so that you get that left side of the spine. But also that right leg reaches down so that right side of the spine lengthens down into the foot. You can readjust your sand, your positioning with your foot next to the wall. Be sure you're clear with your support of your sandbag. And then either go to brain float or hand hook right to the belt, moving it back. This might be too much reach for some of you. That's why the belt loop is a little shorter, a little smaller, right, when you have the arms back. And I can see a benefit to either the brain float or the arm hook into the belt. But, you know, feel if you want to spend more of your energy, you know, not into those generic poses, but complicated personally, you might play around with feeling the belt under the foot and working, kind of massaging a little back and forth with the belt. Loofah your foot until you find, oh, okay, that's when I straighten my leg, that is meaningful to me, right? So find a personal approach. Okay, see with the inhale that you're filling the lungs and exhaling completely. Now, those of you that are brain float or hand hook are going to come back to this position. And we're going to keep using the wall even as we flow through the hips. So I think that we'll go with that because we can access the layers of the leg. So if you find the belt to the ball of the foot to be the kind approach, or the heel, it could be a position where you feel shakiness at the back of your leg. Right? It might even come on after you've been in it for a while and you're surprised that it even happens to you. So what do? You get a little bit more slack on the belt. You still have it pulling the foot. A little slack, maybe a little bend to the knee. That might not be as frightening for the leg. You may have been scared. Okay, now we're going to take the belt together with the left hand and then move the sand away. Wait a minute here. Let's bring both feet back to the wall. Get some balance here. Push into your feet and then just notice, and maybe it feels the same as you started. Maybe there's no difference, but feel the push of the feet so you've got some awareness of that center. And then get a block between your hands, hold onto the block wide block, and then reach it towards the ceiling. Okay, push into your feet, and then push into the wall, and then bring your arms overhead. Okay, now feel the natural arch in the spine. Push into your feet, natural arch of the spine. Okay, so I think what we'll do is we're going to work on this line. So we've got this whole symmetrical base that we're doing our work on. So the spine probably feels like there's some arch, there's a mild arch, it's kind of tone. So now when you slide down towards the wall, you're going to basically still keep on the back. I would try to stay back on the supine position versus sitting up and back and forth. Try to honor where your back has been going. So you're going to slide forward, kind of sneak your way to the wall. Slide, 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 find the alignment. Okay. Now I'm at the wall, closer to the wall, so that my knees point up and my feet, my toes are stretching up the wall on a little board on the base. That works pretty good. But I want you to get even more close to the wall. So you're going to scoot forward to the wall or down to the wall. Your blanket doesn't have to be under your head for this bridge pose, but you might like to have a little support. And then you're going to step your feet up to the wall. So you've got a wide stance. Now, let's say you look up at the legs or you put your hands at the top of the thighs and you slide straight up to the knees. You don't want your knees to be pointing into your chest. You want to have this pretty flush, right? Straight up and down, although it might feel like they are pointing into your chest. So if you push into your legs, right, not pushing it down to your knees, but push to the leg pieces, the femur, you can feel the bone. You want to be able to push and then let your spine flatten, okay? So the tail is moving under. All right. Now step the feet up, one more step up, like your whole foot size up. So now it's like, whoa. Okay, the legs got a little bit more lax, so it's tone. And now we're going to put I hope you still have your props with you. If you don't have your ball with you, then use a block between the knees. But otherwise, get a ball between the knees. Again, you can use a block for this too. It's just a little bit more calm for the knees. Right, the ball, it's lighter maybe. It's responsive and you don't have to squeeze that tight to keep it there. Now I want you to have your belt is away for now. Get rid of that. Hands down by your hips, and then you're going to lift up so slow. So lift up until you feel like, okay, my feet are pushing into the wall. That's the work. Okay. But I'm not spending the energy on tightening my glutes or my rear muscles, gripping them. So it might be a little bit of a weird sensation. You might go, wait a minute, I have to try that. So try to relax the buttocks for a few more moments. Okay, let the spine kind of hang in that traction. And then squeeze into the object between the knees. Try to use your adductors to lift up. And if you've got the blanket and you find that your neck is not needing that, move it away. It's only temporary. And it might feel better. Even if you're on a carpet, it might be better. Because it'll be flat and not so firm. But you lift up through the spine. Now the arms are down. This is more of a shoulder stand version. But I want you to get a feel of where that worked up into your shoulders. Try to balance it out without rolling your head side to side. Okay. Now, you're not trying to squeeze into the ball right now. It's there. You have it held between. But as you lower down, I want you to go very, very slow. Slow, 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 slow. Slower than you can tolerate. It's only temporary, and you're at the final path of your session. So keep going with it. Lower down, and then stop about, before you're all the way down. So for me, it's about halfway. Stop there, and then see if you can come back up the spine. So you're lifting up. So the legs are working out a lot. Now your legs are activated. Way deep in the glute is quite busy, right? Figuring out how to keep you upside down and safe. All right. Now bring the arms overhead, if that will work for your shoulders. If not, you'll keep them down by your sides. For some of us, arms overhead. And then lower the spine down. And your aim is going to be to go all the way through the spinal column with the arms overhead, or if they need to be beside imprint by imprint, making a spine imprint. And then pelvis is heavy. Okay, now we're not going to shock the sacrum, so we're going to keep the lift. We'll do one more round. And so as your arms now move down besides your hips, I want you to get a feel that your feet are kind of resting at the wall. They're not forcefully pressing, they're resting into the wall. You decide on this blanket idea. Do you want to try it again or go without? Feels good when you rest before you lift up your hips, and then it gets to be kind of a bother. Okay, so whenever you need to remove it, you can. Okay, now you feel that you squeeze into the ball a little bit. Now the spine, you drag that down through the ground, so you let your spine make its imprints, and then you lift the hips. Squeeze into the ball, lift your arms back overhead, move through the shoulders a little bit, chest is reaching. Be careful with the blanket under your head. You know it when your chin is jamming in and your neck is overly rounding, okay? We're stretching the neck in this position. Okay, now lower down, and then I want you to do 2 of those at your own pace, which might be quite a bit faster than what I've instructed you to go with, but feel that length through the back and that lift through the hips, that reach through the spine. And then lower the spine down. Okay, breathing, feel the tilt of the pelvis, and then feel the spine press, lifting the hips up. Inhale, and exhale, lower the spine down. Some of you are on a different track of movement. Now, the next time you come up, you're going to use a block, so get a block. Maybe you have a blanket under your head. Okay, you're going to lift your hips up and then put the block under the pelvis. Mine is at the mid-height. Yours could be flat, could be all the way down, or it could be the second height. And then I want you just to get a feel of that support. You don't have to lift your legs up. In fact, let's try not to yet, because we'll get to that. We'll do the full legs up the wall. But I want you to feel, even closing your eyes, and notice the frame of from your hips to your knees, forward to your ankles. Okay, and just feel that frame of energy through your hips. Might not feel like a lot of hip awareness yet. Arms are down by the side, so they're far down, and palms are open. Feel if you can roll the shoulders both down and back and in towards the spine. So it's like you're puffing up the chest. Puffer fish. Interesting visual. Okay, feel the rib cage motion, breathing. This one requires patience. A lot of these do, right? So they have that shift internally, chemically, structurally, right? For your chemistry as well as your structure, but it requires some real patience in the inversions. Okay, so now we're going to do a pretty simple crossover, but I want you to have the focus that you're squeezing into the ball, like you're really pushing into that ball with the leg muscles. Okay, the pelvic floor is certainly active. Now, you don't have to use your glutes that much, but at some point you do have to use that to lift up. So I want you to work with pushing into your feet. Your shoulders might kind of slack off a little bit. Lift up the hips and slide the block away, or just out to the side, it's fine. And then if it feels pretty deep on the upper back when you lower down, you want to really keep that pressure through each vertebral stack, right? They're stacked up. All right. So we're close to the wall, I know. So we're going to take a hip crossover once you're down, and you decide. I'm going to let my legs stay in more of a bending pattern, but left leg over right leg, knees to the right. I happen to have my bolster there, so that's actually pretty nice. If you decide, I really want my leg to reach on the bolster and my sandbag and my ball, you could do that too. You could push farther back and do a different version. But this is fairly simple. We have the sandbag to that outer left hip. If you feel fine without the sandbag, I wouldn't use it if you don't need that. What does need mean in this position? It might bring you a sense of grounding and kind of completion with the direction of the joint. That's what might work with sand. And you might have to move the bolster a bit over until you're cozier. Don't use it at all. It's just a pillow. It's more than just a pillow. It's a hugger mugger. Okay, so feel that shoulder open, feel the brain center and the head turn left. I have the full awareness of the neck to move. Okay, now come back into center. Okay, now you're going to move into the other side. So keep it rather simple and direct when you take the ball out and then you uncross. You bring your center back into your hips, cross the right leg over the left, knees over to the left side. You know, maybe you decide to do it a little differently. Maybe you don't use the bolster. Maybe you use a block under your top leg and the ball still to the sacrum. You might be surprised at how you can rig up a second side that's similar height with your knee. It doesn't have to be put your bolster, but you want the height still. So sandbag right leg, maybe not. Right arm open, head turns to the right. Okay, so we're fine tuning the hips before we do our last pose in the next few moments. So feel where that sense of direction is in your rib cage. Expansion and contraction. Give it a few moments. Steeping into the hip. Notice how the breath is moving kind of through the rafters of the ribs here when it's rotating. It's not just a hip perspective, it's a rib perspective. So even though we're going to get the legs up, this whole area in the center is going to have some kind of weight pushing into it because your lower body, you know, it's got to go somewhere. The energy is going to be draining down into your upper. I mean, it's simply a structure that has blood flowing through it and fluids, and you're just basically doing the science of turning it around and twisting, and you know, it's going to be a little discombobulating sometimes. So if your head is turned to the right, bring it back into center. It's probably still feeling in the hip. Whether you want more time in this one or not, up to you. And then we'll remove any sand and we'll get ourselves to roll to the side and then come over up to the wall with your bolster. So you're going to take the bolster right up at the wall. And you know, you might have the bolster with a little space between the wall and the bolster. Some people do this with a block between. So there's a spacer for your rear to drop into. Some people like that. I prefer just simply right next to the wall. So you decide. If you found that this was really difficult for you, maybe you want to change it up. You could put space between the bolster, but by using a block. And you can always try it. And if it doesn't work, then nobody will know. Try it how you have. So come into this shape. If you need to get a blanket to cover over your body, then make sure that you're comfortable. But you're going to roll so that the legs swing up into Viparita Karani. And I like the sand on the feet. If you prefer the balancing pattern to be, get your sand on your feet and then figure out your proportion to the wall, that's fine. But you want to get a feeling of that separation of the legs, just the right amount, because the perspective for me is I'm not always right against the wall. Some days I am, some days I'm not. And then my realization here is to just accept this separation and to get the most out of that inversion right where it's at. Okay, because my legs seem to be upside down. I think I'm doing that. It must be somewhere close to good. So once the legs are tipped upside down and the circulation changes, feel where the lift is of the hips, feel where the shoulders are back and down. And then arms open. You don't have to have the arms exactly like this. You might have the hands resting on the torso. But do sense the circulation benefit of your chin gently tucking in towards the chest. Still, the head is supported entirely by the blanket. And then cycle in the breathing structure as if that's part of your structure, is the length of your inhale. In proportion to the length of the exhale. Now, as the time goes along in the pose, that's when it ripens and matures for your circulatory system, right? You're reversing the effects of gravity to the heart, to the brain, to the lungs. But most essential, right, the diaphragm is strengthening. So your primary respiratory muscle here below the heart is kind of combating the abdominal space. It pushes onto it with each inhale. So as you strike that motion of the inhale filling the lungs, it also fills the belly because the diaphragm moves down and then the belly lifts. So you know it's working well when you have a relaxed belly. Now with the legs reaching, right, just as you had the feet pushing into the wall, feel that same perspective of the feet pushing up. Even if it seems a little milder attempt at the length perspective, there's an inner lift going on just with that reach. Okay, now let the feet move a little bit away from the wall. Feel that angle. Sometimes that can get quite entertaining for the stomach muscles to have them off the wall and then bend the knees. Feel the bend, feel the bend, feel the crease at the hips. And then as your back has that sense of length, you'll bring the knees closer to your ribs. And if you need to get the sand off now, get it away. And then find a little bit more casual interpretation of knees bending. Always hold the back of the legs, right? Just in case the knees don't need to be jammed in and tightened up. And then feel the spine as it's stretched. Okay, roll to the side. Take a few moments heading into completing the practice and maybe find a sitting shape so that we're in a collective, right? Into this collective energy of practice together, and feel where the hips have their centering balance and the spine has a sense of movement up to the brain. The hands might rest in the legs and the hips might press themselves, centering back. Hands lift up to the heart. Let's relax our brain, our perspective down into the healing of the practice, bowing into our heart space. Inhale together and exhale, bowing into your heart.